again.
USA! USA! USA!
The enthusiasm, you can feel it out here. These folks are fired up and excited.
President Trump has wasted very little time doing exactly what he said he would do once he got to Washington.
We just officially terminated TPP. We're going to put a lot of people back to work.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. We're here today to cut the red tape of regulation.
This is a president that's making good on his promises to the American people, and it's refreshing.
The nomination of Neil M. Gorsuch is confirmed.
The United States Navy launched dozens of Tomahawk missiles on targets in Syria tonight.
American leadership is back in the world.
Terrorists do not worship God. They worship death. Drive them out.
ISIS is out of Iraq. They're being pushed out of Syria because Donald Trump took the actions that Obama wouldn't.
Right now, chaos and anger on full display over President Donald Trump's executive order on immigration.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
I noticed Chuck Schumer yesterday with fake tears. I'm going to ask him who is his acting coach.
I am also calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare.
That was a fiery debate coming to a stunning conclusion. The Senate rejecting the skinny Obamacare repeal.
The problem here was that they just couldn't get the votes.
President Trump has fired FBI Director James Comey.
This director of the FBI should have been fired, has been fired, and asked for it himself.
Robert Mueller, who's the former FBI director, has been named special counsel for Russia investigation.
The entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between myself and the Russians. Zero.
The ayes are 51. The nays are 48. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is passed.
The message to the hardworking taxpayers of America is your tax relief is on its way.
This is Armageddon.
More than 125 companies, big and small in this country, have announced plans to either give a bonus or hike the wages for their employers.
It's so pathetic. The crumbs that they are giving.
The really big win for America is from Apple. They're going to put $350 billion into the American economy in the next 5 years.
It's the economy, stupid. Did you ever hear that one?
White supremacists swarmed Charlottesville. The results were deadly.
We condemn this egregious display of hatred and violence on many sides. The very dishonest media, they don't want to report that I spoke out forcefully against hatred. It's all fake news. Fake news.
Fake news.
I'm changing it from fake news then. Very fake news.
Well, the NFL anthem controversy showing no signs of stopping on Sunday. Nearly 24 players refused to stand for the national anthem.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, he's fired?
President Trump, tripling and quadrupling down on it, has a sense of where people stand. Stand for your anthem, take your protest elsewhere.
Analysts claim North Korea's recent launches show its missiles can reach the United States.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The message is very clear. Don't test this White House, Pyongyang.
President Trump becoming the first sitting president to visit one of Judaism's holiest sites, the Western Wall.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
An explosive new book on the Trump administration. Steve Bannon called a 2016 meeting, quote, treasonous and unpatriotic.
The president is firing back. He said Steve Bannon, when he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind.
I'm not going to waste my time. We're talking about a book that's complete fantasy.
We've been talking about DACA for a long time. It should be a bill of love.
According to a source, the president said, quote, why are we having all these people from blank hole countries come here?
We did it, folks. We broke through that 25,000 mark. We're doing one record after another.
Stocks are on fire. The Dow making history once again, closing above 26,000 for the first time ever.
Unemployment at a 17-year low for African Americans. Unemployment is at its lowest level since the early 1970s.
We have entered into a period of optimism in this country that we haven't seen in a very, very long time.
Wow, travel a decade in a year, it feels like.
Yeah,
right?
are we sure that's just 1 year? Because that's like a retrospective of you said earlier, like 8 for sure.
You forget about all the foreign trips. I mean, Neil Gorsuch, all this stuff. That.
And it's really hard to argue with the results of this administration when you see it. I mean, what struck out for me, I wrote down ISIS don't worship God. They don't worship God. They worship death. Drive them out.
And we have, by the way. Yeah,
we have.
He was talking to Saudi Arabia, but we have in Syria and Iraq as well.
Right, absolutely. Tax cuts were going to be Armageddon, and we see, you know, people's wages going up, bonuses. It's really quite an incredible year.
They finished it on a perfect note. Ultimately, all that noise, Russian collusion nonsense, President promised to make America great again, and look at where the jobs are coming. They're coming back here. Wages are going up. The stock market is up. Businesses are returning. Bonuses are being given out. I talked to a lady who works at Walmart in Ohio. She said, don't tell me this $1,000 bonus I got is breadcrumbs. That's meaningful to me. And policies affect people's lives, and this president has courageously gone after what he said he was going to do, which is rare in Washington, as you know, and he's getting things done.
It's the economy, stupid. So simple, so straightforward. It's doing well. We're doing well.
Absolutely.
It's doing well. And we haven't heard about the American worker this much. I mean, this is just an incredible refocus onto the people who really build this country.
And what a turnabout for Democrats who ran as the party of the worker for years. And now they say, well, we're going to run on the economy. We're going to run on jobs. Wait, does that mean you're going to run on Trump's agenda? Because it's working and people are feeling it. And I think that's why they're lost in the woods. What do you stand for besides resistance? And it's really not clear.
Well, I am not going to resist the new Fox News alerts that are coming up on the screen telling me I got to read this. So we're going to get right to it. President Trump ripping Democrats this morning, blaming them for shutting down the government. David Bossie says Democrats are not putting the priorities of Americans first, and he joins us next.
Plus, as we just mentioned, the economy is surging under President Trump. The Dow Jones closing at yet another record high, and a new poll shows just how happy Americans are about it. These are stunning numbers that we'll bring to you. We've got them for you next.
Time I want you on my bowling team.
Rodney.
Bowling.
Thanks for joining us. So you've got one side saying it's the Trump shutdown. You've got, I thought Mick Mulvaney said it, coined a great phrase with the Schumer shutdown yesterday. Who's to blame and why is the government shut down right now?
This is just a disgusting and despicable display by the Democrats. I'm going to be just brutally honest about this morning. There is no reason that our government is shut down except the Democrat Party, the Democrat leadership wants to create more trouble for President Trump. He has extended olive branch after olive branch to them, trying to make deals with Chuck Schumer, who is somebody you can't trust to make a deal with. And now the president is unfortunately recognizing that the Democrat Party will do nothing to move America forward. That's one of the reasons he won.
Do you feel like the Democrats may have overplayed their hand on this one?
You know, I certainly hope that the American people are recognizing that the Democrat Party is putting illegals, people here illegally, ahead of the American people. That is what the rub of this is. That's the exact down to the nub of it. They are putting illegals, people who are from foreign lands, who are not here legally, ahead of American citizens and our military and quite frankly, all of our government and our government operations. So it is so irresponsible for them to be doing this. And it is a time when everybody has been saying that it's not necessary. These deadlines are fake deadlines. The Democrats are saying we need to vote on something that's not necessary. But it's the principle. They have to be against this president. Why? Because they don't stand for anything except for things that the American people are against. They voted against the tax cuts. The American people are for them. They're voting against keeping the government open, and the American people would like their government open. Although I will say, 4 years later, after the last shutdown, nobody remembers it. It is not going to be the end-all for the Democrats, and they're just playing politics.
Fox News has been at diners this morning in a diner this morning in Florida, talking to people, and overwhelmingly, they're very concerned about what this shutdown is doing and what it says about the military. We've had, 80 of our heroes dying in training. Our equipment's not up to snuff, so the good stuff's going to the field, and the not so great stuff going to the training exercises, and people are dying over it. What do you say about that?
Well, that's so vital to what the American people need to keep in mind. When you say a government shutdown, it's not just the National Archives building is not going to be open for business today. It is that everything stops, right? And so for the military specifically, whether it's troop deployments or moving men and equipment or missions, things get affected in the training, in how they are able to be housed, eating. This is not a small problem. And I think that the American people are going to wake up to the fact that the Democrats are playing politics. This Schumer shutdown, as it's now being coined, and it is so appropriate, is going to fail on the Democrats because they're dealing with somebody in the president who is a great negotiator. And what he's also going to do, I hope, in the next day or two, is explain to the American people and tell them exactly that he gave them everything they wanted. They wanted DACA. He said, yes, I will do a deal on DACA in return for things that I stand for. The border wall, ending chain migration, ending this disastrous, dangerous lottery system. Those are simple things. And he said, I will give you on your end if you give me on mine. And
David,
they are saying no.
David, I actually agree with you. I'm Hispanic. I want a solution for the DACA recipients. I really hope that the president goes out and doesn't just message to the American people about the shutdown and his willingness to find a solution for DACA, but I hope he goes directly to Hispanics and tells them who is really fighting to keep the DACA recipients here and who is not, because he had a very fair deal. He said, I'm going to give them a solution. I'm going to let them stay, maybe even give them citizenship. But I want a wall. I want the end of chain migration, and I want an end to the lottery system so we don't have another generation of DACA recipients here and with no certitude, nowhere to know where they're going. I mean, I feel bad for them. In March, June, we don't know what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, look, I am concerned about them. But I'm more concerned about the American people and the American military. And I will just say that the president cares about them. And the president has said, look, I don't believe in amnesty, and I am not going to support amnesty, but I am going to give DACA recipients something that they can understand and know. So supporting the Goodlatte bill in the House, as an example, is a good way to get this done. It gives DACA, those here under DACA, a 3-year ability to stay here and get themselves in order, at the same time as giving the president the border security, the security for all Americans that we so desperately need. And so he's standing firm for America. And that's what is being lost here. Is this president only cares about America first, and that whole making America great again. It comes down to the principles of supporting and securing America as a country and the American citizens as a whole. That's what he's all about, and that's what he's been doing his entire campaign and his entire first year, this great first year as his president.
Well, David, it is the first year. To that point. It's 1 year today.
It is today, 1 year today. To that point, people may have thought Make America Great Again or America First were campaign slogans. They're actually governing philosophies if you look at what he's done. There's a new 100%. Poll out this morning from the Wall Street Journal talking about the economy. So these are voters, Americans, talking about how they feel. 69%, basically 70% of Americans are satisfied with the state of the economy, which is a huge number. David, did you anticipate a year in that the economy would respond? Even you, did you anticipate it would be this good?
I'm blown away, and so is my 401k, right? And that's what every American. That's why these numbers are so good for the president. And Bill Clinton, and you guys were talking about this earlier. The Democrat Party used to be a party of the American worker, and they have just thrown that out the window 20 plus years ago now. And this president has picked up that mantle and has run with it during the campaign and in his first year. You look at the economic principles that he's put forth in lower taxes, bringing jobs back, job creation, lowering the unemployment. The Dow is through the roof. It is unbelievable the success this president is having, and that's going to be recognized in the midterm elections. And it's the economy, stupid, and I think that we're going to see that in the next 6 months.
You know, you got Democrats who want to force the minimum wage to be raised, and then you have a Republican president saying we're going to create the economic dynamics so companies raise them organically.
Hey, what a concept.
And where you and I live, there is a manufacturing renaissance happening right now in Middle America, and it's just not being talked about outside of this network.
David Bossie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right. Well, Vice President Mike Pence says Democrats are putting our troops at risk.
They have anxiety about their pay. I told them we're going to continue to work the issue. I told them to stay focused on their mission. We're going to stay focused on ours. It's disappointing to every American that Democrats in the Senate would shut down the government by the time we have troops in harm's way.
And someone who knows a lot about this, Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz is a retired Green Beret and author of Warrior Diplomat. Colonel, thanks for being here. So when the government shuts down, how does it affect our military?
Well, you know, you guys are down in a diner today down in Northeast Florida, where I'm from, and there are hundreds of thousands of veterans in that area, and it's one of the largest military locations in the country with multiple Navy bases, a submarine base, and you know, on top of that, today, we have over 180,000 soldiers just from the Army deployed overseas. That's larger than the British, Canadian, and Australian armies combined. And what do they get for that? If you look at the language from DOD's guidance, it says that military personnel will not be paid until such time as Congress makes appropriated funds available to compensate them for this period of service. So they're out there on the wall for our freedom, and we can't do our job back in Washington to get them a paycheck. The last thing they need to be worried about is their benefits and their families while they're out there defending us. I think it's egregious.
It goes further than that, though, doesn't it? It doesn't go further to the planning and the readiness in the future. Yeah. I mean, a little shutdown, you know, 2, 3, 5, 10 days really has an effect later down the road, doesn't it?
Right. So essential, what the DOD or the Defense Department calls essential military operations will continue. The wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Syria and Iraq. But what is not continuing is our maintenance operations, our intelligence operations, the entire civilian apparatus that supports all of those soldiers. All of that is going to be furloughed or is furloughed as of Monday. So, for example, the 3 aircraft carriers that we just had sitting off the North Korean coast, in order to staff those aircraft carriers with a full complement of planes, the Navy had to essentially gut its fleet back here at home. So these budget issues are hollowing out our military when we have threats all over the world. And I guarantee you the Russians and the Chinese and others are fully staffing their militaries as they grow, and they're fully investing in technology. We have to do our jobs here. Guys, I think this is a systemic problem in Washington. I was looking at a statistic yesterday. Right now in Congress, there's only 18% in terms of veterans, in terms of members that have served. And I think, you know, one thing about veterans in the foxhole, whether you're black, white, or brown, whether you're rich or poor, no matter where you come from, Republican or Democrat, you know how to get stuff done for America, and we need that ethos back in Washington.
Certainly we need it as it pertains to our military and our veterans, for sure. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Hey, guys, I have one more thing for you.
What do you got? Oh, get out of town.
Look at
that.
Go Jaguars, baby. Smash the Pats.
You are in the tank. A lot of America's with you on that, I think.
It's going to be interesting.
Good stuff, Colonel. Thanks a lot.
All
Appreciate
right.
it. Well done. All right, coming up, what is the White House saying this morning as Washington wakes up to a government?
And used to work in real estate like the president. And how do you think the president did in year 1?
I think he's done great. Even with all the resistance he's had, he's done great.
What issues specifically do you think he's doing great on?
Well, the economy, he's going to help our military. I have a husband that's retired military, a son that was retired military, and a great-grandson that's in the Navy. So jobs, the tax break.
All good stuff?
All good stuff, and he's got a great family.
Let's get to that husband. Retired U.S. Air Force. Ernie, thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the shutdown with you. You stayed up to watch the shutdown proceedings
I
last night.
did, yes.
What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a Democratic ploy to do anything to harass Trump that they can do. And it's going to come back and bite him, I'm sure.
You had a specific label you'd like to refer to the shutdown as?
Mr. Schumer shut down.
Understood. Okay, let's go to Richard now. Richard is in the wealth management business. He looks at these 401ks from all of his clients. How do you think the president's doing?
I think he's doing absolutely fantastic, and I think all Americans, whether you're Republicans or Democrats, you should be thrilled to know that he's done such a great job spurring on the economy. The corporate tax reduction has helped a lot. The average American's going to pay less taxes no matter what the other side is saying. Everybody's going to benefit. It's just a matter of time before people realize it.
Did you expect this year one?
Actually, I did, because we had to make a dramatic change, and Trump has done that.
Quickly on government shutdown, what did you think?
Well, I think it's just another ploy that Ernie just mentioned, the fact that they just want to do anything to obstruct whatever Trump does, whatever he does that's good, and he's done a lot good. So it is going to come back to haunt them ultimately.
Thank you. And quickly, before we toss it back to New York, I want to give a shout out to Josh. He's Stan the Man's grandson, National Guard. Come in here. He's doing a great job. He's using the National Guard to pay for school. We wanted to give a shout out to him. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Back to you guys in New York.
I hope it's not his drill weekend or he's AWOL. So good for him, though. Thanks for your service. All right, a new Fox News alert. Just minutes from now, members of the House will meet on Capitol Hill to try to restart the government. We will fill you in on that when we have it. Plus, White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley and Geraldo Rivera.
Abstract. The Democratic base is the resistance movement. But the fundamental problem is they don't have a proactive message. What are they for?
The Democrat Party will do nothing to move America forward.
The quote, shocking and alarming memo detailing government surveillance is sending shockwaves through Washington.
It sounds pretty troubling to me. Obviously, this has been a witch hunt, probably the greatest since the Salem witch trials.
The March for Life is a movement born out of love. It is the gift of life itself. That is why we march.
We're also looking back on year one of the Trump presidency.
Donald Trump ran as a change, an agent of change, a disruptor. There's no question that he's fulfilled that mandate and really fought for the forgotten men and women.
Moonlights, moves like J-Lo. Tell me what you want from me, I'll do it if you say so.
Musical Fox News alert. Are the lights down low? Are the lights still on? The lights are still on in the studio. Good point. But are they on in Congress this morning?
I think they're supposed to.
We're not sure if they are. You know, while you were sleeping, first of all, before we get to government shutdown, we have plenty of that. We've got Dean Cain and Rachel Campos Duffy, Superman, on the couch here this morning. It's awesome to have you.
Superwoman.
And behind us, we've got things moving in real time. Superman and Supermom.
She
Perfect
is.
Titles.
I've learned a lot in the last few hours about this young lady, and she is a supermom.
She is. You said, excuse me, 8 kids? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I thought I heard wrong. I just did. Wow. That's just wow.
And a husband in Congress who's still in Congress because they're trying to figure out what's going on because the government, as of right now, is shut down. The Senate was unable to reach a deal overnight. And that's why the White House and Republicans are pointing to, you see it right there, the Schumer shutdown, because while negotiations may continue today and tomorrow, as you've mentioned, your husband, a congressman, is there. They're still having discussions in the Republican caucuses and the Democratic caucuses, but still no end in sight yet for what this deal would look like.
No, we really don't know how it's going to end. I called him this morning to go, hey, what do we have to do about the sitter back home? Because he was supposed to be the sitter at home right now.
But he's not going to be there today.
And he's got a meeting in about an hour. The Democrats are meeting too. And look, I mean, this shutdown was totally avoidable.
Yeah.
This is a manufactured emergency. Democrats saying that it's, that it's the Republicans' fault. But if you look at the headlines, which usually break in favor of the Democrats, especially when it comes to a shutdown, I think that the Democrats may be miscalculating.
Well, this one's just so egregious that even the New York Times, you did some artwork on that.
Well, I always do some artwork on my failing New York Times every single morning. But it says shutdown begins as budget talks falter in the Senate, except the Democrats weren't talking budget, Dean.
No.
They were talking DACA. They were talking illegal immigrants, and that's what held up any sort of a budget.
Yeah, because DACA and illegal immigrants are part of the budget. Oh, wait. No, they're not.
Wait, they're not. No.
They have nothing to do with it.
President up and tweeting early this morning and pointing out that what Dean just said himself in a tweet, said Democrats are far more concerned with illegal immigrants than they are with our great military or safety at our dangerous southern border. They could have easily made a deal, but decided to play shutdown politics instead. Hashtag we need more Republicans in 18 in order to power through the mess. You know, you've pointed out, Rachel, multiple times, a deal was on the table. There was
I was just going to say, usually I like the president's tweet. This says they care more about illegal immigrants or the DACA recipients. I would say to any DACA recipients that are watching, the Democrats don't care about you because there was a deal to be made. You were going to stay here. You were going to get certainty, maybe even citizenship. But the Democrats had to give the president what he wanted, which was a wall, which was an end to chain migration and an end to the visa lottery system. And I believe that the Democrats don't want that to happen because they want to keep this issue alive. It fits their identity politics narrative. And frankly, I think they're afraid that if you resolve the DACA issue, as the president said in the meeting, which seems like eons ago, but in that 55-minute meeting that was televised, he said, if we get this done, maybe we'll move on to comprehensive. And if comprehensive is is resolved and immigration's off the table, Hispanics look a lot like Republicans.
And it's a great
I really
point.
think that's really
Well,
what
no, there is an electoral angle to this for Democrats. They need these voters. They want these voters. We've even revealed on the program today, it's not 800,000 DACA recipients. It's closer to 4 million illegal immigrants who could get amnesty and you're under any sort of a deal. So if you even talk about that without getting a wall, without ending chain migration, without ending the visa lottery system, you are perpetuating not just the fact that we have open borders and the rule of law doesn't mean anything, but potential electoral disaster. But I also think it comes down to the Democrats can't resist the resistance. They just can't. Making a deal with this president makes their skin crawl, and their activists hate him so much that if they do that, I think that's a big part of it too.
In this game of chicken, though, they may have overplayed their hand. They really may have overplayed their hand this time, and it might hurt them coming up in the midterms in 2018.
We will find out. Well, let's bring in Hogan Gidley. He's the White House Deputy Press Secretary, talking about this morning. Before we get your reaction, sir, we want to read the statement the Democrats have put out about this and get the White House's official reaction. The Democrats putting this statement out about the shutdown. They say, what a massive failure of leadership. Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, and Republican lawmakers pulled out all the stops to give a massive tax break to their wealthy donors. But now that it's time to take care of the rest of America, they can't get their act together. The American people clearly want Congress to take care of veterans, combat the opioid crisis, ensure children have long-term health access to health care, and protect dreamers. Instead, Republican leaders have pushed our government into a needless shutdown. This is Trump's Republican Party. Chaotic, destructive, and driven by greed. Okay, so Hogan, ultimately, they say this is all about greed. I mean, where are they going with this?
Give me a break. That's so ridiculous. Nobody's buying that. Look, I'm of two minds this morning. You guys are sitting with a former TV Superman in Dean Cain. I'm working for a real-life Superman over my shoulder in Donald Trump. He stood up for the American people last night. He did not bend. He did not break. He fought to make sure that the military received paychecks. He fought to make sure 8.9 million American children, vulnerable American children who receive health insurance, get the money they need to have health care. He did that. The Democrats did not. Instead, I'm disgusted that the Democrats played politics with people's lives. They're holding the military hostage. They're holding the American people hostage. And these tired old tricks about trying to blame the Republicans, we needed their votes. It's a budget bill. They know procedurally we needed their votes to get this done. They didn't come to the table. They didn't want to come to the table because they want the political issue. They don't want a solution for DACA. They don't want a solution for anything. The only thing they want to do is to run against this president and, quite frankly, the American people, because for the first time in 30 years, the forgotten men and women of this country have a voice in Donald Trump, and that terrifies the Democrats.
This morning you've got both caucuses, the Republicans and Democrats, sort of strategizing where we go forward. What is the White House's position on separating the budget from a deal on immigration? Is there any room for those to be coupled together, or do you remain in the future committed to keeping those two separate?
Absolutely not. You have to make them separate because they're two different issues. This is a budget deal. The president wants a 2-year budget deal, absolutely, to give some security and safety to the American people, to make sure that what they know to be true is actually going to occur, that we have a budget in place. The problem with what the Democrats are doing is they're taking this down roads that they themselves were against before. They didn't want anything tacked onto the budget. You'll remember we called it the Schumer rule. We're dealing with the Schumer shutdown now, but back before it was the Schumer rule, which was don't attach anything non-budget related to the budget. He called Republicans arsonists for doing so. They called Republicans terrorists for doing so. And now they are trying to attach something that has nothing to do with the budget in DACA to the budget. That is absolutely ridiculous. But as it relates to the shutdown, I do have to make this point. I'm reading some of the quotes that Senator Schumer said about the politics surrounding a shutdown. He called it the politics of idiocy. Senator Feinstein last night, talking about this particular bill, said shutting down the government is a very serious thing and people die. She didn't vote for it. So what does that say about Senator Schumer and Senator Feinstein?
Okay. We're seeing the House back in session. Are you hearing any talks about a continuing resolution?
Look, we are in constant negotiation to try to get something done for the American people. The president has been clear in standing up for what he believes in, which is providing those men and women in the military, the people who lay down their lives for us every day, providing them with funding, protecting the military families, protecting children, first responders. They have to fight the wildfires. They're not going to get paid. That's something he's standing for. I don't know why the Democrats won't come to the table with something reasonable and rational, but it is the Schumer shutdown. The Democrats own it. So any negotiation going forward here, any pain felt across this country by the decision from the Democrats is on them.
Hogan, as we said, as Rachel said, we're looking live at a shot of the House floor. As members of Congress do well, there's a lot of talking. We'll see if there's any doing that happens today. But, the president sat down with Chuck Schumer yesterday, one-on-one, and it was reported on both sides that they got closer to a deal on DACA or immigration. What can you reveal as far as where the sides may be closer today?
Look, the president wants a deal on DACA. The American public was open and got to see a 55-minute meeting in the cabinet room that was bicameral and bipartisan. And the president said, I want a deal on DACA. I want both sides to come together, but not as it relates to the budget. It's got to be done separately. We have to put the American people first, the interests of the American people first, something our immigration system hasn't done for the better part of 40 years. The president wants long-term lasting solutions to these problems, but he's got to have Democrats to do it. And right now, they just refuse to come to the table.
The president used to tweet a few months ago even about changing the rules in the Senate so we can have a simple majority. And we have the House, the Senate, the executive branch, the Republicans do. Why don't they change that rule so we can get things done? I really think that people want to, they're tired of this kind of gridlock.
Absolutely, and that's what they elected this president to do, and so far he's been able to do that. Here's what's so interesting, and people need to understand this. The Republicans have 51 votes in the Senate. Any budget deal by law requires 60 votes, which means you've got to have 9 Democrats to put politics aside just for a moment and focus on the American people, to stop holding our military hostage just for a moment and focus on the American people.
Is it the White House
is here? They're focused purely on politics.
Is it the White House's position? Will they pick up the phone and call Mitch McConnell and say, change those Senate rules, go from 60 to 51 so it happens?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're there yet. We're going to have some meetings this morning, so we'll see what comes out of that. But the president's position has been clear. He's not going to bend. He's not going to back down. He will stand up for the American people.
All right, Hogan, before we let you go, it is the 1-year anniversary of the inauguration. For folks out there who, it feels like you're watching 4 years in 1 year when you watch that highlight reel. What's the biggest takeaway folks should have about the first year of the Trump presidency?
Effectiveness, getting something done for the American people. Again, the forgotten voices out there who've been crying out for help for so long. This president comes into office, record-setting accomplishments in record-setting time, passing a tax cut that no one saw coming. In fact, after the Obamacare failure, everyone said he can't do anything. He's going to get through his first 2 years and not have accomplished a thing. He has proven the critics wrong time and time again. And the best part about it is the beneficiaries are the American people.
Hogan Gidley. Thank you very much, sir. Now get back
Thanks.
to work. I know you will.
Get back to work, yes.
All right, moving on. Democrats digging in, shutting down the government over the so-called Dreamers and immigration. Geraldo Rivera says what the Democrats are doing is despicable and avoidable as well. He joins us coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, babes. You know how bras are super expensive and the department store lady is always really put.
I think, first of all, Pete, you're the only one on the show right now that hasn't had a reality show. You should get it together, man.
I'm working on it.
It's 4 against 1.
Good point.
Yeah.
No, 3 against 1. My math.
I think that I don't care if you call it the Schumer shutdown or the Trump shutdown. You know, to borrow from Shakespeare, a pile of crap smells just as stinky, by any other name. I think it's very, very unfortunate. It's maybe the cynical shutdown. I feel worse for the Dreamers because now they're going to be blamed for this absolutely unnecessary, act by the legislation. I just think that it's pathetic. Why did we get here? How did we get here? Whose purposes are served by this? Are the American people served? Are the park rangers who are going to be laid off? Are their interests served? The members of the military who are not going to get paid right now? Our relationships with foreign governments when they look at us and we seem so dysfunctional. I think that it is really, really pathetic, and I'm mad at both sides. And I also think, though, the President of the United States is a friend of mine. And I have no doubt but that the Democrats were less inclined to make a deal because they understood that this is his first anniversary. This is the culmination of his first year in office when he should have been celebrating his achievements. And there's nothing either side does to help bring the American people together.
Geraldo, the president wants to divorce the DACA solution or whatever they're going to come up with that idea from the budget and from the CR. What do you think about that? And who is really on the side of these DACA recipients? Who really wants to make a deal?
I think, first of all, in terms of divorcing DACA, DACA has nothing to do with the continuing resolution or the budget negotiations, just as in 2013, the defunding of Obamacare had nothing to do directly with the continuing resolution and the budget negotiation. Every once in a while, one party, because you need 60 votes to get these budget items passed, one party gets the minority party gets the leverage where they can really put the screws to the majority party, and that's what the Democrats are doing here. I think that yes, of course, he wants to divorce it. President Obama wanted to divorce the defunding of Obamacare in 2013, but these are politicians. These are cynical people. These are self-serving people. These are people whose business is not the business of the American people. Their business is to get reelected, and ultimately how the American people judge this will be reflected in the midterms.
But to Rachel's question, though, Geraldo, and you've talked a lot about immigration, illegal and legal, as far as who are the real advocates for Dreamers, and we've learned now that it may not be 800,000, it could be as many as 4 million illegals. I mean, that's the constituency the Democrats say they're concerned about, and President Trump says, hey, it's the American citizens that I'm focused on. But ultimately, he's willing to make a deal. So who's falling short here?
See, Pete, you're bringing me into the trap where I have to negotiate the substantive issue that has nothing to do with the budget resolution. I feel, and have made no mistake, and have written 2 books, that I feel that we need comprehensive immigration reform. I also believe, as a person profoundly interested in the national security of this country, that of all the immigrants that we let into this country over decades, these 800,000 are probably the most vetted, the most investigated, the most scrutinized, the most impressive, admirable group of immigrants ever. They go to college, they're in the military, they're nice people, they have good families. I mean, I'm not going to be Pollyannish about it, but if quality is what we care about, if a merit-based immigration system is what we care about, these kids qualify.
But Geraldo, let's get to the point,
they've been dragged into this.
But Geraldo, if the Democrats wanted to do something for these DACA recipients, why did they blow up the deal? And why are they attaching it to a budget negotiation that they know is going to go nowhere when the president's already made clear what the framework is? He says he has to have border security in exchange for a solution for that.
I think that what you'll have eventually, Rachel, is in the next few days, you'll have a continuing resolution, a lot of bitterness, a lot of finger pointing, and then you're going to have 3 weeks of the most absolutely reprehensible, bitter debate, savage debate over immigration.
We got to cut you off right there. Sorry, Geraldo. More
Good
Fox
morning,
and Friends
everybody. Have a great week.
on the other side.
You too, Geraldo.
Thanks, Geraldo.
Guys, is this you busting out of your pants? Out of shape? No energy or drive? Then you need...
Sounding completely delusional, but they have not decided to do that. And I mean, there's kind of an expression that goes something along the lines of, if you keep repeating the same things over and over and expecting different results, you're insane. I think that that's clearly what we are seeing from so many members of the media who are just running totally with fake news stories based on a single unnamed source, not verifying it at all, because it confirms the preconceived notions that
some of it is not just that they're reporting fake news. I think some of it is just omission, that there's been a lot of success, and those aren't being reported. We saw a retrospective. We saw, talking about ISIS and the economy.
The highlight reel.
The highlight reel. That's right. And, you see that here, but you're not seeing it in the other media outlets.
Yeah, I think you're totally right that they are choosing to ignore that, and they're choosing to focus on stories that are really, really dumb. I mean, the koi pond controversy where Donald Trump supposedly overfed fish, and then when you just watch 10 more seconds of the clip, it was very clear that he didn't do that. I mean, that's just a perfect, clear-cut example of the media just running with really, really dumb things. And honestly, there are so many things that you could criticize this president about. I mean, Donald Trump promised that he would respect religious liberty and that he would protect the Little Sisters of the Poor. And yet the Department of Justice has not dropped their lawsuit against the Little Sisters of the Poor, and they're still fighting for their right in order to adhere to their religious beliefs as they serve the poor and elderly who can't afford health care. So that's a perfect example of a way that someone could legitimately criticize the president and say, here's an example of how he hasn't fulfilled his promise. Yet they're deciding to spend an entire day talking about how he overfeeds fish. Yeah. I mean, for weeks, if I had $1 for every single time I heard an armchair psychiatrist say that, he was totally insane, despite the fact that they never even met him once in their lives, I would be super rich, and so would the rest of the country. And then when presented with the White House doctor who evaluated President Obama and Trump and saying he's totally fine, nothing's wrong, they're doubling down. I mean, the Washington Post called the doctor himself delusional.
Of
right?
course.
So,
actually,
so
to your point, Bree, too much nuance. Let's listen to them. Listen.
Straightforward.
There's no question that, by all standards, by all metrics, any way a doctor or cardiologist would look at it, the president does have heart disease.
He said 239 pounds.
Whatever, but I mean,
I know I'm being a girther, but I mean,
the White House press corps seemed stunned that the president, who cannot button the button on his suit coat, isn't much heavier.
Will they ever see themselves in the mirror, Bree?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And, whenever approval ratings for the media is in the single digits, and they never like to talk about that, and they never like to ask themselves questions about why that might be. And the footage that we just watched is a perfect example of why their approval rating is in the single digits. This is the reason why Americans completely distrust the media, because they're going on and speculating about his health and his weight, when here we have a professional who is saying he's totally fine, everything's fine, stop worrying about it, he doesn't have a problem, and yet they're just going full truther on this. I mean, I don't know if you guys...
hypocritical, Bree. I mean, I thought fat shaming was out of bounds for liberals.
Making fun of looks,
no,
all that.
That's the point, is when you're a Republican, all of those rules completely go out the door. We've seen this with Melania and Ivanka. They go after their looks, they go after their hair, their outfits, their makeup, every single thing. And if you ever said anything like that about any of the Obamas or anyone serving in the Obama administration, it would be totally awful. Yet when you're a Republican, all those rules go out the window.
Oh, the way they attack Sarah Sanders as well. Same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Bree, thanks
exactly.
a lot. Too much clarity. We've got to cut it off there. All right. Coming up, how will the Schumer shutdown impact the booming economy? Our own Neil Cavuto, described as the hardest working man at Fox News Channel, and I think that might be right. He's live with his new show at the top of the hour today.
His fifth new show.
First, that's right. He joins us right here on Fox and Friends on the other side of the hour.
Plus, and I was shocked when he said it, but it resonated with me because it goes to the exasperation I believe many Americans are feeling right now, that while our elected officials who have the responsibility of protecting us are playing footsie
And I'm going to go to you, Rick, on that, because then I'll get David, you to respond. Because it doesn't it feel like Democrats are a bit out of touch here, where people are saying, I've got $17 in my bank account, but this party is worried about protecting illegals and potentially holding up the government in the process.
This is all going to depend. You know, one of the things we're reacting to the shutdown last night, but there's a very good chance this will end up being the so what shutdown by Monday. There's, I'd say, better than 50-50.
Who blinks?
I think everybody blinks, because I think everybody's played a role in getting us here. I think by Monday morning, very good chance the government opens, that they will have extended this another 3 weeks, and we go on. So let's wait and see. Democrats will take some heat over the things that you're talking about. If it continues, I don't think it will.
Interesting. The headlines seem to get a concession like that from you, Rick, means the headlines this morning, no, they acknowledge that. They say, hey, Democrats are holding it up. If it is decoupled, let's go with Rick's theory that the government doesn't shut down, then it becomes a debate about immigration and DACA. As a conservative, where would you feel comfortable with that deal ultimately landing?
Well, and I want to say this before we get to even that deal. Let's look at the calendar. It's January 20th. DACA expires on March 5th. That means this was a construct of the Democrats and about politics, not about actual solutions. Anybody who can read a calendar can really see that for what it is. They could have put this aside. However, when you go to the politics of this and you push it down the road, CR is nothing. That's continuing the bad behavior. Sure. What are they going to fix? So while people are arguing over what should be done about DACA, the real important issue here is the more millions of Americans and hundreds of millions that will be affected if government doesn't work correctly. It doesn't affect a large amount of people relative to the population. The military, let me tell you something, and you know this, Pete, our military and military families are a lot stronger. They're not weaklings all of a sudden because there's a shutdown, but they will show up for work on Monday without pay, and they will stand in organizations that you work with, that I work with, that I sit on the boards of. If a family needs help, you go to WWFS.org, call us. We'll get you the help you need if you're one of those, privates that doesn't make much money. So the government workers who make a ton of money, and when I say ton, they make more money than the military. Let's put it that way. The pressure has to be put on them. And one of the pressures I'd like to see put on, you're not going to get your back pay for your furlough.
Sure. No, there's pressure that could be applied in a lot of places.
Talk about the politics.
But hold on, that's exactly where I wanted to go.
I think that the Dems have overplayed their hand because, I mean, going back to the man who has $17 in his bank account, people are barely being able to survive, robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping their head barely above water. And
so what does this mean when they go in the ballot box?
And when they go into the ballot box, like when, well, for one, I think that that the sympathy, because right now DACA has bipartisan interest in moving it into some kind of resolution. But I believe that because of what the Democrats are doing, they've overplayed their hand, and people are going to begin to resent the whole concept.
Rick, do you think that it could play out that way, Rick?
I think in real life, even if this goes on, you're always going to have the situation, if you are a Republican or a Trump supporter, you're going to blame Chuck Schumer. You're going to blame the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you're going to blame probably the president. You get to the ballot box, I question if it'll even be on anybody's mind.
I think people don't care.
The average American,
you don't
you're going to
care.
forget this in a week and go on with your daily life.
But I really do want us to stay on that theme, though,
it's a slap in the face as well.
McConnell did promise for the last CR that he would deal with this DACA thing in January. He broke that promise.
A lot of promises from a lot of people.
Who cares?
Nancy Pelosi also said they'd shut the government down over DACA, and they have, and now we'll see if it lands in their lap or not in 2018.
What Nancy Pelosi says we should never take for anything. If you go back a couple of years and you look at what she said when the Republicans were doing it, it's about hypocrisy. And the fact is the Democrats have done nothing about illegal immigration or DACA when they're the majorities and the supermajorities. They've done nothing about taxes.
They've lost control of my radio host. I'm sorry.
No, you guys are fantastic. Rick, David, and Kathy will have you back again to continue to debate this. Thank you very much. All right, Rachel, regain control.
I'll take it from there, Pete. Turning now to your headlines. The government shutdown not stopping the CDC from tracking one of the worst flu seasons in the U.S. in recent history. The agency collecting data on flu activity, hospitalizations, pediatric deaths, and the effectiveness of the vaccine, as health officials warn the virus is only getting worse. 32 states and Puerto Rico experiencing high activity last week. The Department of Justice announcing plans to retry Democratic New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez as soon as possible after a federal judge declared a mistrial in his high-profile corruption case. Menendez is accused of accepting gifts and campaign donations from a friend in exchange for political favors. A deadlocked jury back in November forced the mistrial. And this one's for you, Dean. Superman is going back to his roots. The DC Comics superhero will once again don the iconic red trunks over his blue jumpsuit for...
Make no big deal about it once it happens. The fact of the matter is that markets, like the economy itself, kind of look at things that are bigger than the U.S. government, if you can fathom that. And they've been enjoying this ride. It's been an incredible ride in stocks just over the past year of this Trump administration. A Dow surged second only to FDR. And remember, in his opening year, he was coming off very, very depressed levels in the market. They've been beaten down after the crash. And the fact of the matter is, these markets were at relative strong levels then, and he's taken them up 31% since then. So I think this is the market's way of saying, yeah, we would prefer everything being open, but it's not the end of the world if they're not.
So the president is in D.C. because he has to deal with the shutdown. He was originally going to go to Florida to celebrate. Right. He's had a lot of success, a lot of reason to celebrate. I was on my Twitter and people were saying he should go ahead and celebrate. He deserves it. What do you make of what he's done so far? And you know better than anybody about the record-breaking numbers.
Well, the numbers are startling when you think, as I said, they came from already pretty high levels, and then he got the tax cut through. But remember, the tax cut through just came at around the time of the holidays, so there was a run-up in anticipation of that. And then, of course, a run-up with the president dramatically cutting back regulations, the kind of things that a lot of CEOs were telling me, some of whom we'll be hearing from later today, that has been the wind at their back, just taking that, monkey off their back, because that has been a problem. And if you were to ask them a year ago what their more pressing need would be, just get the government off our back. Now, there are people who are going to agree or disagree with that sentiment, but the fact of the matter is that paved the way for this run-up before the tax cuts even happened.
Absolutely. Well, the tax cut that did hit, the tax cuts that Nancy Pelosi called crumbs. Have we even seen the effects of the tax cut on the market itself, or is it going to continue to keep pushing it?
Well, Dean, it's interesting. I think a lot of things that happened with the tax cuts were what you found out when you dug through them. One of the things I think that's remarkable is what corporations are doing, because not only did their rate go down dramatically from 35% to 21%, but here's what's remarkable, that they also had another curse of riches. Critics will say too much, but they had a one-time rate of 15.6% to take trillions that are held abroad and bring it back home. Apple indicating that it's going to be paying $35 billion to the United States government. It's going to invest $350 billion over the next 10 years. Whether you want to credit that all to the tax cut, it's very clear without it wouldn't be as aggressive or as generous. And I think what's remarkable is all these bonuses these companies are giving out. In other words, they're free to spend that money any way they want to, but they've been plowing it back to their workers, to their customers. In the case of utilities, cutting their rates 5% for customers. I mean, I don't think this was appreciated or absorbed by many in the media, myself included, about how this will reverberate way beyond the market, because these are individuals who are getting these bennies long before, weeks, months before they're going to see it pop up in their paychecks.
And they were told that they were never going to get it. They were told that the companies were going to hang on to it and not give it out. So, Neil, you have your new show debuting. It's Cavuto Live. So who's on live today?
Is that today?
Yeah, I think it's in about 10 minutes.
Oh, all right. I didn't know that. Well, thank you for updating me, then, Superman. We are looking at that. At this. We're looking at just where this falls out. Not only for the markets, the economy, I had an opportunity for 2 hours to do what I love during the week, marry what's happening on Wall Street, happening on Main Street, or K Street, if you will. And this intersection between taxes and money, stocks, that's something we're going to be following a good deal. We've got Senator Tim Scott joining us, just bumped into him a short time ago. South Carolina Senator has proven very pivotal. If we can get the government doors reopened, he'll be joining us on what the dilemma is here and how this might not necessarily be falling ill exclusively on Republicans. That has typically been the case in the past, but it could go a different way. We're also going to talk to the VA Secretary, David Shulkin. This at a time, of course, where the president, remember he had that physical, and a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, is he up to the task? What I marveled at that physical report was the president eats a lot of fast food, and he's still deemed in excellent health. This was a great inspiration for me, and I went immediately to McDonald's to celebrate. But the fact of the matter, we got a lot going on, fast-moving developments here, but I look forward to it. And there's no better way to set things up than you guys first and maintaining a fraction of that energy.
We will now. If anybody can do it, you can. We were happy to pass the baton to you at 10 o'clock.
Is Dad coming home? Answer, I don't know.
Dad is a congressman. We don't know. Hey, join us again tomorrow because Dean Cain and Rachel will be here again tomorrow. We're going to have, I can't believe it was a 4-hour show.
No, it wasn't. It was a 3-hour show.
It was a 3-hour show. The best part about the show is now we get to hand it over to a new show, Neil Cavuto Live.
Get him, Neil.
Where were you last year at this time? Well, we were here, exactly here, last year at this time. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and thank you for joining us for our debut edition of Cavuto Live. I named it myself. Anyway, we're exploring things that we explored on our great business shows, whose prominent characters you're going to be seeing every week here to digest what's going on, not only in that house behind us, but what he's been doing since and what it means for the economy and the markets. And here we be 1 year later in the middle of a government shutdown. We're going to be exploring that and what is at stake, not only for your money, but that famous intersection I talk about between Wall Street and Main Street, and might I add, K Street in the nation's capital. And we've got a who's who of players here to sort of explain that to you and what's at stake in the Capitol right now, where technically the government is not functioning. Tim Scott will be joining us. Michael Dukakis will be joining us. Ronna McDaniel, the RNC. We've got David Shulkin, the VA director, and Mark Meadows of the Freedom Caucus. His concerns also growing about whatever efforts they make to patch together a deal. And they want to talk about doing something as soon as Monday, whether that will pass muster, forget with Democrats, with Republicans. Remember, he was a guy famous for saying he was holding his nose when the House approved a measure that ultimately the Senate just couldn't garner enough votes for. Now, we'll be raising that with Tim Scott very, very shortly, who says that everybody has got to get on the same page eventually, because shutting down the government is not an option. And by the way, there's a back and forth as to whether this is hurting Republicans or Democrats. In the past, it has hurt Republicans. Maybe not this go-round. We're also keeping track of the President of the United States. He's been commenting. He's supposed to go to Florida. He canceled that. He's at the White House right now, and he's been busy tweeting. We'll get to that in a second. But in the meantime, we want to go to Peter Doocy from Capitol Hill on what's in store here, because the House, I guess they're already in session. The Senate soon in session. Right, Peter?
The House is officially in session, Neil, in about 2 hours, but right now House Republicans are coming in. Here's your guest in a couple hours, Mark Meadows, who's heading into this closed meeting. They're talking about what the Senate did last night, which is fail to pass this month-long continuing resolution. Instead, now they're trying to pass one that goes through February 8th, but because Mitch McConnell wasn't able to introduce that until very, very early this morning, they can't even consider it until very, very early on Monday. So the government is going to stay shut down until at least then. There was a big bipartisan group of lawmakers that got together on the Senate floor late last night. It looked like they were negotiating something, but ultimately they did not get anything done. And Republicans say it's all because of disingenuous DACA requests by Democrats.
We've all been having private conversations here on the floor. Almost everybody on both sides doesn't understand how we ended up here, because most of this stuff we agree on. Well, there's only one reason we ended up here: the shoehorning of illegal immigration into this debate.
But the top Democrat there, Chuck Schumer, claims that he made a concession Democrats hadn't even been considering, so he doesn't think the shutdown is his fault.
He walked away from 2 bipartisan deals, including one today in which I even put the border wall on the table.
But just because the government is technically out of money, relevant agencies are still going to send benefit checks to people who are on Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. The Veterans Administration hospital system is still running. The mail is still going to get delivered, except on Sundays. And you'll still get a pat down from TSA agents at the airport because they are open too. But most of the IRS is going to be shutting down, which is good news if you're trying to avoid an audit, but it could be bad news if you have questions about the new tax code. The EPA only has enough money to operate for a few more days, and you can't come and get a tour of Capitol Hill. Non-essential federal workers are furloughed. That means, for example, that the Capitol Police has to show up, but their paychecks may be delayed. Neil.
That's got to be tough if you're deemed a non-essential government worker, right? I mean, whatever.
Right, and I was hearing from some folks over on the House side and House offices where people were very upset yesterday because their bosses, lawmakers or chiefs of staff, have to go around and say, okay, we need you on Monday, you're essential, or you're not essential, you can stay home until we figure this out.
That would hurt my feelings. All right,
Although
Peter, thank you very much.
the break.
Well, you're right about that. You're right about there is the benefit of that. But they're unpaid during that break, so that could cut both ways. Peter Doocy, thank you very, very much. Now, the question, eventually. Now, the question is how long this lasts. And I told you about an effort right now to make it as short as possible. Given the timing of this, remember, this went past midnight last night. So given all these arcane rules that I cannot comprehend in the United States Senate, the soonest we could get something going to formally reopen the government or even to address it would be Monday, I think. But fortunately, a fellow far smarter than I in this process, Senator Tim Scott, rising star in the Republican Party, in the leadership of the fine state of South Carolina, where they're dealing with snow. So we knew that you were paving the way for crazy stuff.
This is cold, but the Schumer shutdown is even colder.
Now, I noticed you said, and everyone has been saying on the Republican side, Schumer shutdown, Schumer shutdown. It might surprise you, he's been calling it the Trump shutdown. Whose shutdown is it?
It's a Schumer shutdown without any question. Every facet of the deal the Democrats want. The one thing they do not want is that they do not want the president in a position to make progress on the DACA issue on his timeline. So instead of dealing with the DACA issue before March the 5th, what we've all committed to doing, he wants to make it a campaign issue and make us the demons as it relates to DACA, when in fact...
So you think he kind of overplayed his hand here?
He knows it, the Democrats know it, and frankly, the American people know it. We ought to solve the problems that are right before us. The CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, has expired. We offered a 6-year extension on Children's Health Insurance Program, and they said no.
You know, a lot of people, and I understand where you're coming on this, and I know the administration has already indicated we're willing to revisit this at the DACA immigration issue, but first you got to open up the government again. So I understand that's coming up.
Absolutely.
But when would that be? I mean, this could conceivably end quickly or linger a long time.
I assume that we'll start voting again today. We go back into session in just about an hour or so.
But voting on what?
We'll be voting on different versions of this plan. Lindsey Graham and others have been flirting with an opportunity to have an extension to February the 8th. That would give us enough time to solve a number of issues.
He voted against this thing in the Senate last night. He's your colleague.
Yes.
He had telegraphed that, but were you surprised?
I was not surprised. He has been saying all week that he was a no for the February 16th date. He was a no for this part of the process. He said to me last night that the February 8th date is something that was worth considering. It gives both sides enough time to get every single thing back on the table and to solve those issues.
Senator, Lindsey Graham was critical of what he deemed to be, I don't want to misquote him, a perceived about face on this DACA issue by the president, that in the famous Tuesday meeting, remember that it was live and everyone was witnessing it, he seemed to say, you guys get together on a DACA measure, I'll sign it, I'll take the heat. And then a couple of days later, we're told after meeting with some conservatives that he changed his mind. Do you know what the backstory is on that? Because Lindsey Graham read into that the president changed his mind, and from this famous meeting where he seemed to be open to that on January 9th, that he reversed course.
I don't know. I was not in that meeting. I do realize that without any question, paramount in the president's priorities is making sure that border security is fused in to whatever deal we make on DACA.
And that wasn't in this
I don't
measure?
think the numbers were high enough. And frankly, I think we'll get there between now and the end of February.
Do you have any sense right now that this is, I mentioned before, Senator, that the markets have kind of dismissed this. I don't know whether that's because they're getting used to this. I mean, it happened a little over 4 years ago. I understand that was 16 days. But they tend to do well during this. Mark Penn will be joining us shortly, Bill Clinton's Svengali. And, you know, markets went up, especially afterwards. So do we deal with this or what?
I think what it is a failure in leadership. The Schumer shutdown reflects that the Democrats are more engaged in campaigning and politics than they are in governing.
And you guys aren't?
Well, almost every single Republican voted to extend funding for the government.
Almost. 4 did not.
Out of 50.
Yeah.
So we are absolutely in charge of the government to the extent that you can be with only 50 votes. You actually need 60 votes to be in control of the Senate. We don't have 60 votes. We need our Democrats
to come to the table. But a lot of people look at it, you're quite right, Senator, that you guys have the run of the table. The White House behind me, both branches of government on Capitol Hill, hey, this shouldn't have gotten to this point.
Yeah. But Neil, you know as well as anyone because you're brilliant.
Thank you very much. You're coming back again.
Say the truth. Here's what you know. In the Senate, to run the Senate, you need 60 votes on legislative items. Without those 60 votes, you're not in charge of legislation.
Okay.
We only have 51 votes at best.
But could this have been avoided just dealing with it earlier? Like it's like a college thing, right? We do our term papers the night before and you could save yourself a lot of grief if you were earlier.
Listen, 3 months we've been negotiating on these principles that are part of the plan. The Democrats signed off on all of those. What they've now decided to do is hold hostage the American people and the government for something that is not yet imminent.
Senator, great having you. You're our opening guest on this new show.
This is a great balmy day.
It's a great honor for you, isn't it?
I'm ready to be home in Charleston.
There you go.
We'll do what we do.
Senator, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Senator Tim Scott put it better than I could. I mean, right now, the fact of the matter is, to the Senator's point, that if you're looking for this to discombobulate the world as we know it, still early, but it has not happened. Now, normally, shutdowns tend to be on the heat of the party that controls Congress. And in this case, it is the Republican Party, but that is not necessarily a given. One of the things we've discovered looking at this in the past is that when you look at where this goes and how people are weighing this, they don't like a government shutdown, but they're opposed to forcing one based on making DACA the linchpin for it. In other words, as much as they dislike shutting down the government, they really dislike shutting it down based on a single issue, and in this case, DACA. Mark Penn joins us with that, of course. You recognize him as a key Clinton pollster. I like to call him the Clinton Svengali in those days, but very good to have you, my friend.
Morning.
One of the things we're going to be looking at, we're just setting you up there, I appreciate that. Were you surprised by that people don't like these government shutdowns, but it didn't play out the way typically they have?
Well, I think that there's a little risk here the Democrats are taking because, let's face it, they've been leading in all the polls and in their election position, and now they do a shutdown over a single issue DACA. That if you go back to 95, we stood our ground on the basis of Medicare, Medicaid, education, and the environment, really huge issues. And here people are saying, yes, we support DACA, 77% do, but I don't know that they would have shut the government down now, and so there's some risk for the Democrats now.
In other words, it's an important enough issue, but not worth shutting down the government. But is that registering? I mean, obviously people are looking at this. There's a separate Washington Post survey that says, no, it's on Republicans and all this. I think there's a pox, to your point, maybe on both parties' houses, but where do you see this going?
Well, first, there's no question the big loser is America. People in the military, the post office workers, people who then have to wait for their paychecks. I think that the system is a loser because Americans just dump on Washington when they see this happen. They know these are now political stunts. When you say, well, Wall Street's sloughing it off because, well, it's a political stunt. They know they're going to get the government back. They know they're going to restore all the paychecks. It's almost a dance. But it's a dance probably they think shouldn't have happened. And I think here the danger is that this spins out of control back to, I think, a breakdown of our government. And that's more disillusioning, just as the economy is coming up and people beginning to get confidence again.
You know, you mentioned confidence. A lot of that, to hear the president tell it, is buoyed of optimism over these tax cuts and everything else. Then normally they come to fruition and people start seeing them later. It's something I'm going to be raising with Pat Buchanan and some others here. But Is it your sense that Democrats might regret, unanimously rejecting those tax cuts?
I was surprised that Democratic senators in Republican states didn't go for the tax cut. We've seen opinion move. We saw only about a third a month ago favoring the tax cut. It's now up to 47%. That is a huge change in only a month. And I think when you actually tell people what's in the tax cut, most people wind up favoring it. So I think the tax cut is going to wind up likely to be more popular than not. And so I'm surprised that some of these Democratic senators didn't go the other way.
We talk about shutdowns and who benefits and who doesn't. You could make the point, that in Bill Clinton's case, some say that he followed a parade but then ran in front of it to lead it. Be that as it may, the shutdown brought us, welfare to work, brought us a lot of big first entitlement program changes, and it took Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton to do that. Do you think something as consequential could come of this, however long it lasts?
Well, I hope that a deal is made. I think that will be consequential. If a real deal is made between border security, dealing with chain migration, the lottery, and giving a path to citizenship to dreamers, that will be something America will say, aha, finally they did something. And I think if they get there in the next few days, everyone can be winners when today everybody are losers.
You know what I wonder about, Martin? You follow this much more closely than I, that each side gets into their extreme position. It's almost like professional wrestling, that we cannot budge from our pre-crafted extremes. And so there increasingly is no middle ground.
Well, particularly in political negotiations. People don't realize that in political negotiations, people dig their heels in absolutely the most in public, while in private they are scurrying to make a deal and end this thing because they know it's really unpredictable if they stay in this position, for much longer. So. And in fact, everyone plays their hand out with the public to the maximum. Think of it like these labor contract negotiations. They got to stop the clock at 12:01. Hey, they know that they've shut the government down during the weekend, and if they can get it back by Monday, this thing will be a blip. If it starts to go into next week, the political dynamics will then change.
Midterms, real quick take, how do they look?
Midterms, I think there's no question that the Democrats now have an edge. If you look at the national congressional vote last time, it was 49-48 Republicans, if you add up all the votes in Congress. I think the Democrats now had about a 3 or 4 point edge going into this, and I think they've taken some unnecessary risks, both on tax and here. However, there's no question they're in a stronger position than the Republicans.
To take the House?
Take the House.
Really?
I think the Senate would, the table is unfavorable to the Democrats, but I do think right now, and typically, in the midterm of the first election of almost any president we've had, that is what happens.
Yeah, we shall see. Mark, thank you very much for coming. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Mark Penn. All right, to Mark's point here, a lot of this could hinge on how people feel about the tax cuts. I mean, in the middle of a government shutdown, the president has been crowing about them, and we have seen some unexpected benefits of those tax cuts before average folks start seeing their paychecks maybe as soon as next month. And that is all these corporations that are giving out bonuses. Better than 3.5 million Americans have benefited from everything to $2,000, $2,500 bonuses to even utility customers getting 5% tax breaks. And that has surprised a whole bunch of folks here. One of the things that you don't see in the mainstream media, or the media in general, is getting into the weeds on tax cuts. But I do remember a time when we had something of similar happen, going back to Ronald Reagan's days, in the first wave of tax cuts then. And there was sort of a sentiment expressed in the media, even the Wall Street Journal, reporting that they were too big, too revolutionary, too costly, and that they would not be greeted favorably. Then something happened along the way. People were getting their paychecks with those taxes taken out, or a good chunk of them taken out, and they liked what they saw. I can remember it from my dad at the time, even me at the time. You look at the paycheck, you see the net, and you're saying, you know what? I've heard people kvetching about this, but I've got more money. That single-handedly startled the media then, because while Ronald Reagan was being ripped for that, and the slow response to tax cuts that at least the media deemed doing too little too late to help the economy. I remember back then he was deemed to be a guaranteed one-termer as things got worse before they got better, until, as I said, people saw those checks. Pat Buchanan remembers it well. He was but a kid himself then. Right. He joins us right now, the multiple best-selling author, a very powerful conservative voice. Pat Buchanan, good to see you.
Good to see you. Can you cut down the air conditioning a little bit here?
A little bit. You know, it's interesting because I was looking back at some of the research here, and the headlines for weeks, months after the tax cuts, the Reagan tax cuts were too much, too extreme, wouldn't do any good. They were kind of ripped like these ones have been.
They were not
and
only
yet,
ripped.
We know what happened.
Well, what happened was Reagan lost 26 seats in the House in '82. He was in trouble, real trouble there in '83. But when they really cut in the tax cuts, the economy started booming. What, he had 6% growth in 1984? Well timed.
I think it was something simpler, though. I think people, they were hearing how awful these tax cuts were back then. And then they looked at their paychecks and said, hey, my net just went up. Or, hey, this is good.
Not only that, that's going to happen, of course, you know, in this year. But at the same time, I mean, you can't keep running and saying, you know, the tax cuts were awful. People are going to turn around and say, are you going to raise the corporate rate back up to 35?
Right.
If you guys get in, let me know that real quick. So I think, and also, you can't keep repeating that same message. People, okay, we know you didn't like them. Let's see how they do now.
Mark Penn was saying that there are some Democrats, especially in those states that Donald Trump won, who might regret their no votes on this thing. What do you think?
I don't know about that. I don't know if people are going to go to the polls and say, you know, how did he vote on this or that, including this shutdown or whatever it is going on right now. And
shutdowns rarely move polls.
You know what's interesting is, for an economy with African American, Hispanic unemployment, white unemployment lower than it's ever been, the market is booming, which is a lead indicator. It looks like the Republicans may get wiped out in the House and maybe in the Senate. I think the reason is, when the economy is good, something else is the issue. And when the economy is bad, the economy is the issue.
A lot of people cynically say Donald Trump is the issue. For whatever good he's been for the markets and the economy, whether you want to credit him for either or both, I think we would certainly blame a president if it wasn't good, so he might as well take a bow if it is.
I think it is.
But do you think that he gets in the way of his message?
I think there's no question about it that part of the reason for the problem of the Republicans is the tremendous hostility to Trump, the hostility through the media. I mean, I live out there in Virginia, and it was a real wipeout for in that election. And he's, what's he, about 38, 35% or something like that. But the Republican Party is down. I think it's because of that. But he's, I mean, the first term with the opposition he had, you know, as I say, I'm getting tired of winning.
Yeah, you know, I have a feeling that we're under appreciating, is such a thing, the depth and the magnitude of what corporations are getting out of this. You could cynically look at it and say the companies, this was way too generous to them. If you were of the view that they would just throw it back in their stock or dividends or whatever, which they're free to do. But the fact that maybe because it is a curse of riches to them, they have a lot to share with their workers in the terms of bonus checks, utilities with the term, 5% rebates to customers. I don't think that was factored in.
Well, it helps the 401k and all the retirement plans. But my bet is this: I'm a populist conservative.
Are you really? I thought you were.
Very much so. But I vote for cutting the corporate tax rate to 15%. Not for the benefit so much of the corporations, because this is the way to bring corporations and jobs and all these things back home to the United States. I know folks might not like it, but in the from 1865 to 1914, the corporations were hiring all these Americans, giving them better pay and better benefits. The American workers and the corporations were doing well together. Now, the first guys at the table are the corporations right now, but I think if they deliver this, and the stock market says they will, I think Trump's he's made a good bet for the whole party.
He freely and openly talks. You can't blame him sometimes because he doesn't get a lot of fair shakes in the media here, but he talks up the markets. Ronald Reagan was loath to do that. And maybe it served him well with the '87 stock market crash, even though markets were still up appreciably when he left office and when he came in. Is that a risk? What do you think of a president constantly touting the markets? They've been good.
I think I tend to agree with Reagan. Look, this market has not been good. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, and I often ask the missus, "Do you think we should dump some of this stuff because this thing's coming?"
Money.
I've gone through a number of these things. 87, you know, with I think Alan Greenspan was just in there, and I remember saying the market went down 25% in one session, and I used to say the good news is this can only happen 3 more times.
Well, what did Reagan say? Stocks go up, stocks go down. He just didn't know.
I can always.
But you know, look, these milestones that we've been seeing in the Dow and everything else. You can make the argument that with a lot of this money coming back home, that there's a lot of room to run, right?
It's not like money coming back. I think a lot of foreign companies are going to say, look, let's get in the United States, you know, I mean, let's, you know, put our money in there and not repatriate it, keep it in the United States.
All right. Good seeing you, my friend.
Good seeing you.
You're still going to complain about the cold weather, whatever.
I noticed you got a jacket.
Oh, listen to this guy. You're a tough big guy. You're the pitchfork Pat. What do you calm down? All right, good seeing you. Thank you for being here for our debut day. All right, we were mentioning that, and Pat really astutely mentioned that as well. You know, these markets, they've really never looked back. The Dow, 31%, second best performance we've seen on the part of a first-year president. That's not too shabby. Remember, the comparison was FDR. Back at 33, of course, Pat was there for that one. But I'm joking. Even he.
It started at a fairly low level.
Exactly. Really go. But you know what was remarkable about that? Back then, we were off well-depressed levels. We were already coming in on pretty high levels. And look at where we've gone. The markets this week up across the board, in out of record territory, certainly the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. And a lot of people equate that with what's going on here in Washington, not only in that house behind me, but on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, now that they have successfully cobbled together those tax cuts, the likes of which and the benefits of which average folks presumably will start seeing, 90% of us, we're told, in our paychecks next month. All right, in the meantime, the read on all of that from some of our biz pros, John Layfield, we've got Adrian Elrod with us, and Gary B. Smith. I promised you that we would be hearkening back to the great shows that brought us here, including Bulls and Bears, cashing in so many more. So we're going to continue to mix and marry our historic winners here to put in perspective the stuff that matters to you. So John Layfield, looking at that and what you're seeing, you always wonder about, you know, an uninterrupted run. We have had an uninterrupted run here in a market that is yet to see so much as a 5% correction. Does that part worry you?
It does. Look, and people are starting to look for negatives. It's hard to find negatives right now, and that's one of the scary things about a long bull market. This is the second longest bull market, the 90s being the longest bull market in history. And I think right now people are starting to worry just to worry. There's not an event on the horizon unless there's a geopolitical event, say in North Korea, India, Pakistan, or the Yemen proxy war escalates. There's not a geopolitical event, anything on the horizon, or an event on the horizon that looks to derail this economy. The only thing that worries me is China exported deflation for so many years. They're starting now to export inflation. I think 6 to 18 months we could see that. We're seeing oil prices up 50% in a year, copper's up 31%. We're starting to see some commodity inflation, but that looks to be 6 to 18 months off. It looks like, according to Janet Yellen in her last interview, that it looks like smooth selling for the next 1 to 3 years, the foreseeable future.
You know, Gary B., you look at the markets and they look kind of bulletproof right now. There's always an outside aberrant event that undoes these things, whether, you know, in 87 with the argument over portfolio insurance or whether you could protect your investments through insurance. Of course, that was a foolish notion then. It's deemed that now. But is there anything on the horizon that you think could disrupt this? Let's say a government shutdown.
Well, it's interesting, Neil, you bring up. And by the way, congratulations on your new show. You know, you're just not on TV enough, so it's nice seeing you occasionally.
That was my complaint,
Yeah, exactly. As far as the government shutdown, it's interesting. Forbes did a study of this during the 2013 shutdown. The average return for the market in non-shutdown times is 0.3% per day. You know what the average return during a shutdown is, and there's been a number of them since 1976, 0.3%. So it's exactly identical. The market shrugs off a shutdown. It tends to do what it's been doing. And the second answer to your question, is there anything on the horizon? I'm with John. It's always what you don't see. Look, even the Fed missed the beginning of the housing crisis when other people saw it. So you got very smart people that can't see what, in hindsight, always looks obvious. I don't know what it is. I'm worried about, quite frankly, the only thing Trump economically that concerns me is what he might do with trade and get into a trade war. That could trigger some pretty disastrous consequences. Everything else, though, he's done pretty darn well.
Edward, when you look at things, one of the things that people worry about is interest rates backing up. Now, they're still very, very low, but a 10-year note, we gauge rate direction based on that. That's the highest it's been in over a year. And some say when it hits 3%, it's not all that far.
Yeah.
Maybe people will look at that as, you know, hey, that's a safer guaranteed rate of return than risking it in these markets that look heady. What do you think?
Yeah, look, maybe, but I think, you know, ultimately this tax bill that we're talking about here gave corporations the permanent tax cut, did not give middle-class families a permanent tax cut. So while corporations have a long-term permanent tax cut, you're not seeing that with working families who only got a 10-year tax cut before this has to be renegotiated again. So to me, it's the instability, it's the